Hello and welcome once again to the Overlapping Magisteria channel. I am your host, Overlapping Magisteria, or Guthrie Prentice. So today's topic is basically taking a look at inside the workings of the fast food industry. I barely had a couple of weeks working there, but my experiences were because of my autism, but I wanted to find out if they were just a case study, like an isolated incident, or if they were something more prevalent. So with me today is Will Johnson, a former Army sergeant, I believe it was.
Yes, correct.
Former sergeant in the U.S. Army who currently now works at McDonald's. So hopefully his perspective will provide a little bit more contrast as to what fast food looks like in the States compared to whether it's a Canada versus States thing or whether it's something across the board. Anyway, basically the experiences that I've had have been majority. I would put them as inefficient. Primarily, I used to work for a Canadian chain who I will not say the name of because I don't want to get sued automatically for telling even my experiences the truth. Basically, the thing is that I got fired after a 2-week period because my social skills were not up to standing. But amongst the incidents that happened were things like I would be working on the sandwich line. There would be 3 of us on a lunch rush. Nobody would be hitting the board to tell which orders had been completed, and nobody was talking to anybody on the line, letting everybody else know what orders had been, what part of what order had been completed. So as a result, we were consistently reinventing the wheel. This pissed me off, of course, and I got sent home for an afternoon because I yelled at saying, "Why will nobody complete the job as we'd been taught to by routine?" Another aspect that happened with the same fast food chain is I was working the coffee shift at the front, making the orders as per the system the supervisor had taught me, and another worker tried to teach me a completely nonsensical system, like things like 2 mediums in cream equals a large and all this kind of thing. And when I finally talked to the supervisor to ask about why this was, what the correct system was, they said they'd handle it. And rather than actually, chastising the other worker for trying to teach me a system that wasn't actually working, I got sent to the sandwich line in the back. So I'm wondering whether or not I also apparently got fired, one of the reasons I may have gotten fired was for yelling, was for a little bit louder than intended about cross contamination when somebody was not wiping their knife down after having made shrimp sandwiches because of, there were people with seafood allergies who were customers. So I'm wondering whether or not it came across like there was more of a social game, more about trying to one up another and be favored in the eyes of the manager, and less about actually making the sandwiches efficiently, or or actually trying to make the coffee system, or even paying attention to basic food safe. So I'm wondering, Will, do you have similar experiences of people not paying attention to rules and regulations like this down at McDonald's where you work, or is the situation radically different? Like, how is the social dynamic in terms of working with or conflicting with the efficiency of the workplace? Hello? Well, it appears our friend got booted. So anyway, while we're waiting, I'm going to... well, this was a little bit of an interesting turn of events. I'll just briefly check to see what happened here. Yeah, this is the thing. I was just about to ask Will about his experiences, and apparently he dropped. Well, let's give it a few minutes to see if he comes back. Well, that was a... oh, this is embarrassing. Anyway, I'll try to keep my voice down and do magic tricks while we wait. Hmm. Ah, we're back. So now that little recess break has happened, let's try this again. And we're back with Will Johnson, former U.S. Army sergeant who now works fast food in North Carolina, I believe it is. So, Will, as I was asking, how, in your experience, how does the social dynamic either work with or conflict with workplace efficiency at the McDonald's you work at? Hello? Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing... Pardon? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Well, it appears today's the day for technical difficulties. Hello? Okay, I'm going to briefly reload and come back and try this again. Stay tuned, everybody, for we'll be right back after these messages. Hello? Hello? And while we're waiting for this to continue, hang on. Anyway, while we're waiting, let's see if, okay, I can't hear Will. Oh, wait, maybe I can? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
All right, I can hear you fine.
Brilliant, I can hear you now.
Okay.
So where were we? Before that little technical snafu kicked us in the rear, I was going to ask, did the experiences that I was mentioning, does it seem where you work at McDonald's, is it more of a, how does the social system actually work or how does the social hierarchy, does it work in concert with workplace efficiency, or does it end up conflicting? What's your experience been with regards to social plays like this in the place where you work?
Now, let me predicate my answers by stating that I work in the kitchen. I've yet to do any kind of work on registers, but I find that a lot of it is a lot of the efficiency of the kitchen is dictated by the person that happens to be by whoever the blue shirt, which is basically our term for the shift manager that happens to be in there. Again, I'm not going to name names to stay professional, but we're just going to call them K and L. I find that L is able to maintain a considerably tighter ship when she is there. I don't know if it's the fact that she has more experience in it, but She keeps a closer watch on what sandwiches are going out, the quality of the food that's going out, the cleanliness of the kitchen, the pretty much the same things that you would expect a manager to, the same duties you would expect a manager to perform, and demands this same level of efficiency from her crew, and as rightfully she should. In contrast, Kay is the same manager, is the manager who would rather, as interesting situation that happened today with Kay and L. L actually accused Kay of, quote, holding the floor down, and her refusal to actually step into the kitchen to do anything. And this is not the first time that's happened. This is also the same manager, Kay, that is, that told one of our co-workers, mind you, that the lady, she is an older lady, to, quote, shut the fuck up, as she was explaining that she had already performed one of the duties that Kay was asking me to perform. And I honestly was too much in shock that it had happened to even say anything about it. And to me, that's conduct unbecoming of a manager, as well as conduct unbecoming of a decent individual. As far as food safety goes, McDonald's requires us that every morning when we put down our first runs of food for the particular morning, we are required to document temperatures of those foods, be it quarter meat, which if you know McDonald's, quarter meat is the same meat that's going right now is on the quarter pounder, the double quarter pounder, and select stores that have the signature crafted recipe sandwiches. You can get that meat on there as well. What we refer to as regular meat or 10-1 meat. That's the same meat that you see on cheeseburgers, hamburgers, the Big Mac, etc. Each individual meat patty is required to be at a certain temperature when it comes off the grill. Those temperatures are mandated by the state and the county, and some of you would know that by county or parish, as some states have. And those particular temperatures are recorded in a spiral notebook that is kept in the manager's office. I find that, again, depending on which manager is there, whether or not that action actually gets performed. Same thing. I find that it's also, again, if you have worked fast food, you know that food that is actually on the line is supposed to come off of the line after so many hours, and those hours are tracked by an hour in my store. And I'm sure it's like this in most McDonald's, most franchises, that we have a label machine that we is simply touchscreen. We simply touch, what we need and how many, and we literally put a sticker on the container that the food is in. Those stickers can range from anywhere from 4 hours to 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And I find that at the conclusion of 4 hours, that food isn't coming off the line. That food is simply having another 4-hour sticker placed upon it. Granted, if the food has not been used, that's one thing. But and we have had situations where we'll use bacon, for example. I've had situations where there would be a total of perhaps 2 actual strips of bacon in the container. And rather than putting more bacon down and getting a fresh batch, they'll stand right there and let those 2 pieces of bacon run out, and not tell the grill, whoever is actually on the physical grill, that the bacon needs to be topped off. And but regarding the experiences that you had, I've had pretty much the exact same experiences. We have individuals who will place meat on the grill without so much as a single hand covering, no kind of glove, any of the like. They don't clean the grill between runs of meat. And to answer the question that everyone's asking, no, we don't. No, the 5-second rule is not in effect. At least not at my store. Not that I have seen. However, there are cleanliness issues in my store, again, as I'm sure there are in all.
Mm-hmm. So, quick question with regards to the I'm assuming you guys have a screen where orders once they're punched in come up on the in the back. Has there ever been an issue where you might have two or three people working on the grill on a rush or what have you, and people are not taking off the orders when they're done, so somebody ends up starting an order and it turns out that somebody else has already done that order?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Fortunately, we have a pretty good communication system between specific people. I find that our table, usually how our store is set up, is our table is in the middle of the kitchen. And again, if you're familiar with McDonald's, again, your local store will be set up slightly different. It all depends on how the physical building. But the typical way that a McDonald's is set up is if you come in, you walk into the kitchen on the left hand side.
Hmm.
On the left, on the and on your right is the what we refer to as the table. Some stores, some restaurants refer to it as the board. Some refer to it as the cabinet. It's all just terminology, but it all pretty much means the same thing.
Hmm.
Typically, we run on side B, we run a single individual on the table. Side A runs two individuals with the grill cook on side A. And I have had it happen regarding communication. Unfortunately, we only have one microwave that is usable at lunch hour, and in that microwave is where a lot of the breakfast food, i.e., your bagels, your biscuits, your muffins, the like. It's not that we are making those fresh during the lunch hour. Not typically. Typically, what we're doing is using biscuits that are left over from the breakfast rush, and simply heating those biscuits up in the microwave. Well, unfortunately, side B doesn't have a microwave, so in order to get a biscuit down the line on side B, we're dependent on side A to get that biscuit into the microwave. Then then we have to listen for that microwave to go off and ask side A to give us the biscuit. Whereas it would be, efficiency would be improved tenfold by simply placing a microwave on side B.
Just out of
And we don't
Sorry.
have, and no one has done this.
Just out of curiosity, from your perspective of having worked from having worked both military and currently working fast food, what would be some suggestions you might have for improving efficiency across the board in McDonald's, for example? You know, as a first as having worked the kitchen yourself.
McDonald's is the same with all jobs. Efficiency is key, and the key to efficiency is communication. Um,
Mhm.
because if we're not, a quiet kitchen is an ineffective kitchen,
Mhm.
because it either means that the grill person doesn't know what's going on the physical table, or it's a situation where the grill and the table are so in sync with one another that they don't have to communicate, that everything is done non-verbally. And I do have a couple of people at my store that I'm able to do that with, that we can get into sync with each other. But unfortunately, I don't work with those individuals on a regular enough basis that there's any change to the efficiency of what's coming down the line. Now, to change that, my recommendation, honestly, again, as you said, as a callback to my military service, is we set these people up in squads. I.e., again, just to use random names, Jim, Joe, and Jack are all those three are always going to be working together. And because those three are working together, they learn each other's mannerisms, they learn each other's speed, they learn each other's the slang terms that each other use. The communication barriers eventually get broke down, and the speed of receipt. And for those that don't know that term, speed of receipt is a term that refers to the amount of time that it takes for us to get the order in the kitchen and for it to leave the kitchen into the customer's hands. Speed of receipt will be significantly improved as will the quality of the food that you're getting. I'm sure, again, if you're familiar with McDonald's, I'm sure you've had that experience where you've went through McDonald's even when they weren't busy, ordering a double cheeseburger, and when you open the cheeseburger, the cheese isn't even on isn't even between the buns. It's somehow managed to migrate itself onto the wrapper itself. Now, how that happens is the table will get moving so quickly that they're not paying attention to the way that they're putting the ingredients on the sandwich. How that and and it's a double-edged sword because the you want your people to be efficient, but at this fast, but at the same time you want them to be efficient. So you need people that can find that borderline between the two. And when the system of working the same people in a squad together, you will find that borderline because you'll find when, if Bob is on the front part of the line down there, putting the ketchup and the onions on the sandwich, and Joe was down there physically wrapping the sandwich up, they know Joe knows how fast he needs to be before he gets another sandwich in his part of the line. Same way with the grill guy. He needs to, when you set that up, he knows how often he needs to be picking burgers up off the grill. And when this occurs, when this pattern gets in sync, it's a thing of absolute beauty.
One other quick question, and I wanted to run this by you while we're on the subject of fast food. I know there's been a large talk about trying to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. My question is, considering that management, especially managers, are literally doing frontline customer service, fielding complaints and all that sort of thing, I'm wondering the following proposal: um, whether or not the management being a more advanced form of customer service work should be treated with corresponding pay, and customer service work should be bumped up a little bit. And secondly, I'm wondering whether or not there should be a two-track manager stream for fast food, one that works the kitchen and one that works the customer service out front, and the two managers work together to coordinate between the back and the front.
Well, to answer your second question, fortunately, our my store actually does have a system set up like that, and when the system is working, it works
Mhm.
beautiful. It works beautifully. There's a certain amount of chain of command that goes down, but at the same time, having dual managers like that, you as the manager, you have to be 100% sure that the people that you are answering to know that it's you specifically that they answer to. Um, you know, manager A if manager A is in the kitchen and manager B is on front line, and manager B asks for something from somebody in the kitchen, at that point, then you have a situation. You have a confused employee because he's getting conflicting orders. And the same thing happens in military. The difference in the military is conflicting orders will get somebody killed.
Hmm. And that's my question: is whether or not it's possible to streamline that management position, so this way people know which manager is the appropriate one to work with.
Oh, it's 100% possible, but in order for that to happen, the employees have to be mentally clear on who it is that they are physically who it is in the chain of command that they answer to. Without knowledge of that chain of command, they're not gonna know. If Joe told me to go get ice cream, but Kevin told me to cook. I mean, who is my manager? If Kevin is my manager by chain of command, I'm to hell with the ice cream. Somebody else can get that.
Hmm.
But the problem is, it's not if it is not made obvious to individuals that are working for the company that this particular gentleman or lady is the person who you answer to, you're going to get conflicting information like that. And while when this same worker in question should be on the grill cooking, on the grill dropping meat. Well, he's not there. Nobody knows. The kitchen manager doesn't know where he is, which means the kitchen manager is having to come off of his or her position and work, and basically pick up the slack that this employee is leaving behind simply because of a miscommunication.
Yeah.
If you can figure out a way to ensure that the employees understand the chain of command, the system should work flawlessly.
The other question that I had was with regards to, since we're talking fast food, the fact that everyone is, again, I don't know quite how it works with regards to, wage increases in the store you work at, or in North Carolina. But what I'm wondering is whether or not the minimum wage, whether or not fast food should be not just getting a minimum wage across the board, but whether or not there should be wages that are more commensurate with specialization of skill, and also as well whether or not the folks up at head office are perhaps, if they are doing customer service, are getting if their job is to be the front face of the company, with the public, for lack of a better word, whether or not they are getting overpaid for a type of customer service work, and whether or not wages should be not redistributed, but reset to be commensurate with position.
Well, first, let me predicate the answer by saying that when I started this job, I made more per hour with no experience in food service or kitchen or any type of a kitchen job than I did in any retail job I've ever worked with 10 years of retail experience. So, contrary to belief, at least in my situation, McDonald's pay is actually beginning pay is not terrible. Right now, I make roughly $1 higher than what our local minimum wage value is. As far as increasing the minimum wage, in I think a lot of that depends on the quality of the output of the output. It's to me, it's an output versus input question. Um, the output here being the pay that you're receiving for the job, the input being the job itself. When if the input is if you're putting in a level of input that is equal to the output, I'm all for this. But at the same time, if you're not performing, say, 1050 an hour's worth of work, and the next guy is performing, 1050 an hour's worth of work, obviously he's the one that should be getting that 1050 an hour increase. I mean, it's likely that the reason that he is performing this level of work is because he's trying to finish up all of his work because he has a family he's trying to go to or go home to. Or in my situation, he has, a college exam that is due within 3 hours of getting off work. And yet this doesn't really happen. We have, and it's not just in fast food. It's in the job market in general. We have a lot of situation where the work ethic of the employee, to me, is not equal to the pay that they're requesting. Yes, I'm all for a living wage, absolutely. But at the same time, if you know that you make, say, $10,000 and $10,000 a year, and you know this, why it's a maturity issue for you to try to live at $100,000 a year.
Fair point. And I'm wondering how much of that, and that will be a subject for another video, but I'm wondering about how much overall, but I'm wondering about how much of that is, I'm wondering how much of this is dealing with inflation issues, and but more specifically, I guess the question that I'm wondering is how can we reinstill a work ethic so this way, when we do the increase of the living wage, we can do it on a case-by-case basis where people are seen for actually working that merit. How do we convert it to more of a meritocracy where people are actually being paid what they're worth?
What I'm about to say is going to be extremely controversial, but the first thing that I would recommend we do is completely eliminate the entire concept of free college, at least in the U.S. At least in the U.S. minimum. Other countries worldwide, this won't work. and here's the reason why. The collective IQ of the American people is, on average, 60 to 70 points lower than the collective IQ of any other country on the globe. The reason why this is honestly because of the way that the American school system is set up. The American school system is set up not to set you up for a job. It's not set up to set you up that once you graduate, you're going to have the skills you need for life. It is set up so that you get grades. It is all based. It's all a numerical point system. When you, as a student, can learn to manipulate that point system, it doesn't matter whether you've actually learned anything or not. All you're doing is regurgitating memorization. Once in that same situation, because of that's the way that the system is set up, once the high school student gets to the university or even junior college level, they're walking blindly into the line of fire, absolutely unprepared for it. That's why college dropout rates are so low. The reason I say that we eliminate the idea of free college altogether is because of the fact that every college is, at least in the States, is such at a level so accessible now that it's the entire concept of, well, I have a higher education, I've tried to do something better with my life. It doesn't hold the same weight that it used to because everyone is doing it. It's the same way if, I say, I drive a Ford Focus, and everyone thinks the Ford Focus is the greatest car in the world. Now suddenly 10 million other people drive the Ford Focus. It's lost its prestige, it's lost its value. Regardless of the fact that it's still the same Ford Focus, it still offers the same features to the world that it offered to me, but the world is not seeing that.
Quick question: what are you while we're on this subject, and I guess I know that we're diverging here a little bit, but given the fact that and again, this is just purely because again, I'm not entirely sure how this works in the U.S., but what is the actual likelihood that a person would be able to say, working at McDonald's or what have you, be able to adequately pay for their tuition? And what are your thoughts on the ability to for collections agencies to be able to grip such high amounts on student loans?
Fortunately, again, I'm not sure if this is the same with all McDonald's franchises, but fortunately, my store offers tuition reimbursement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know because I haven't fully looked into it yet because I took the summer off from school, but I don't know what the limits on that are. But it's one of the few companies that still do that. As far as so you asked me about the tuition. What was the other question?
With regards to how high student loans can get, the fact
okay.
that with the fact that banks can get loans at 1.9% and then redistribute them as student loans at something like 23%, and the fact that it's and the fact that I've heard it's nearly impossible to declare bankruptcy on them.
Yeah, it is. We have to remember that banks exist to make a profit. Now, this is not be apologism for banks, because the entire concept of a bank to me is highway robbery. Yes, they exist to make a profit, but they exist not to fleece the customers that are doing business with them. As far as the ability to get loans, because the fact that loans are so readily available and the fact that the interest rate on them is so high is, again, for that very fact. The fact that the banking system is a for-profit system. They're going to do everything in their power to ensure that they make as much money as they possibly can. Is it morally correct? Absolutely not. But from a business perspective, and me as a business major, I understand why they do it.
What would you propose as as you said, doing away with free education in the United States? What would you propose as an alternative to the student loan issue, but would simultaneously make sure that people actually, we're being less about a numerical grade system and more actually paying attention to what it was they were doing in college or university?
Apprenticeships. That's all. That's exactly how you solve the problem. sure, if you want to go, and at the same, and honestly, one would say, well, a college is, studying for an apprenticeship. Not really, because if I'm studying to be, I'm studying to be a business analyst. Me having to know, me sitting in a classroom and, learning from a teacher who barely knows the subject matter themselves is not apprenticing. If I'm a business analyst, what I should be doing, I should be getting handed financial reports. I should be getting handed business reports and going through through these documents and going, they went wrong here, here, here. You need to fix this, 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 and this is how they do it. But that doesn't happen at college level. So, we replace the entire concept of the idea of a free education. You want your free education? Go into an apprenticeship. This not only does this teach you a viable skill, it teaches you a skill that's going to be beneficial to your community at large. You want to go into firefighting? Apprentice under a firefighter. You want to be, an architect? Apprentice under an architect.
And I would actually argue that, and extrapolating from this, I would even argue that in the hard sciences, I understand they need you to learn your basics with your degree, but if you're doing research, if you have a research idea, theoretically speaking, you should be able to learn the basics about whether your idea is right or wrong in situ, as well as conducting your experiments.
No, absolutely.
Like you should be able to. You should be able to apprentice to. You should be able to do your degree all in one go, rather than having to jump through three degrees to get your doctorate.
Again, because the idea of college is a for-profit system, and the reason why, and people will ask, well, why is the cost of college so high in the United States, and why is it a for-profit system? Because a college education in the United States is not an education. A college education is 4 years of pretty much paying money to say that you're in college. It's a prestige. You learn very little. And why do tuition costs keep increasing? Why do book costs keep increasing? Because, little known fact about the college experience, there are colleges now that have Olympic level stadiums on their campus. They don't have adequate chemistry labs. They don't have appropriate and adequate computer networks, but they can pump millions of dollars into a sports complex. Priorities. That's how you solve that. That's why college is so expensive.
And from that, with regards to the to make the tuition reimbursements that McDonald's, for example, is using worthwhile, perhaps restructuring the college system, not to say you're in college, but to there was an old expression called co-op up here in Canada for the engineering departments. You study for a term and then you work for a term in your relevant field. Maybe having a combination study and work term as a more regular occurrence. A sort of co-op style program, much like an apprenticeship, like you were suggesting, would be a far more effective way to run the colleges.
Sure, would be, absolutely. And
Yeah.
one of the most effective uses of it I've seen actually is in the United States Navy. Again, those that are familiar know the term of entered apprentice or the master apprentice. The reason why this is, or excuse me, sorry, wrong term. That's masonry terms. Are seamen recruits, seamen first class. All of these are levels of competency for the job that you have chosen to do. The reason why a chief petty officer is a chief petty officer is because he has mastered what is necessary to reach that title. Whereas in the U.S. Army, a master sergeant is referred to as a master sergeant because he is supposed to be a master of all of the competencies of his job. Does that happen? Very rarely.
And based on your experience again with military, with regards to this, what would you suggest as a method for better checking for that competency or better ensuring that competency?
physical testing, performance reviews. Anyone, it's the same thing. You can give me a test and I can study for this test, and I've not learned a damn thing because again, all I'm doing is regurgitating. Whereas if I build houses for a living, let's say, and you give me a test to say, well, how many inches is this gable supposed to be? And I say, 37 inches. I know out of my head that the correct answer is 37. But that knowledge, knowing that in my head, is not going to tell me how to pull out, the protractors, how to pull the proper angles on that gable to make a 37-inch gable.
And that's the question that I'm wondering is, can we find a way to redo performance reviews and stuff like that, not just in college? And this brings us back to the fast food idea. I'm a little curious about whether about this idea of that fast food is a job that someone can grab immediately out of high school. Isn't there a lot of isn't there a certain amount of on-the-job training and stuff for flipping burgers? Shouldn't there be also a separate streamlined process in the high schools to be able to get into that job more effectively?
Well, I would not necessarily say that job, but a job in general. Fortunately, the high school I graduated from participates, or at least it did. I'm sure it still does, in a program that North Carolina offers, where you have to graduate high school with a major the same way that you would need to graduate college. Fortunately, I double majored in high school. I double majored in business and military science. Imagine that, right? Well, in order to the particular classes that I took were a effort to prepare me for the fields I was going to be going into. I.e., I took my 4 years. I took all but one of my 4 years of high school I was in the military science program. Some people would know it as JROTC, and as well as throughout my entire college career, being a member of the Future Business Leaders of America Association, the Vocational Honor Society, different things like that. And the entire purpose of that is to train you for the situations that you're going to run into in those particular kinds of jobs. The only reason why I know parliamentary procedure right now is from an extensive use of it in high school, as well as the only reason I know global politics is because of an extensive run in Model United Nations and mock trial. But not every high school in America is offering these things. When you set up all of your high schools to be able to give programs like this for students who are interested in them, and you will see a significant increase in both high school graduation as well and job performance.
So by picking majors for high school and providing more of a concentration, it'll be more likely that the brightest minds of tomorrow will at least have the technical skills they need to be able to get not only to get through their job, but possibly even able to better function in society.
Absolutely. Case in point, an example of that. Again, as I've said, I was in mock trial for several years of my high school career. I have several times on Facebook have got into pretty heated legal debates of how that lay people believe that they understand the law as it is written, and I can pull out precedent after precedent that states otherwise, and that's all because of mock trial.
So one final question before we wrap this up. I'm wondering about whether or not only would be picking majors for high school, but whether or not a streamlining process for colleges should. If we're, I guess the question is why, if we're doing this picking of majors for high school, and using the apprenticeship system, should we be getting rid of free education in general, or does free education still have a place as long as it's properly constructed?
Well, here's the problem with it. The problem with giving away anything free is that you run into a situation where the recipient learns to expect that it's free. And this sounds extremely Republican, but I assure you, I'm an independent. But when you keep giving handout after handout after handout, the person you're giving the handout to comes to expect that handout. It's best summed up as the if you give a man a fish allegory.
Right.
And if you have a situation where this gentleman, say there's a gentleman is working 40 hours a week, and he's doing everything he can to better himself. He he's going above and beyond at his job. He's coming in early. He's staying late. And he's on good terms with his managers. He's asking his managers what he can do to improve. A gentleman like that, I have no problem with him receiving his college education paid for if he wants the college education. But in that same job, the gentleman who is never to work on time, always leaves early, and won't even speak to his manager under the current system can still get that free education. And is that equal to you? I mean, is that morally justifiable?
That's a fair point. Is that, and I guess this ties in. I'm going to reference. I reference my paper in the description below. This does tie in with another issue. I had made the assumption that by providing people the basic necessities to work at their optimum, food, clothing, shelter, basically making sure that they are, by providing them the tools to work at their optimum, that hopefully they would in turn want to provide back that they in turn would want to pick their field and then do the best they could in it in order to be able to improve society as a whole. I'm wondering whether or not there is a way to basically, I'm wondering, how do we address the problem of where's the next Einstein coming from if he's worrying about his next meal?
Exactly.
Pardon?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do we do this in such a way whereas the average person is? Do we do this in such a way that the average person is covered for enough that they are alive, and then from that say that the quid pro quo is that they are to put into the system, or do we demand to see the work and the work ethic up front first, and then provide them the appropriate resources? I guess how do we balance this effectively in general, and from that try to extrapolate the system that we've been proposing about apprenticeship, etc.
Well, the thing with if we again use the same thing as the military, use the military example.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the military eats, the reason why the military is closed, it comes out of the taxes of a nation.
Right.
Once those taxes, if you allocate those taxes into a federal nutrition program, into a federal clothing, into a federal subsistence program, specifically for this, and you set everyone up, you set up the basics. I'm not saying that in this program, if you're a single male, that you're going to get a home, a 4-bedroom home, 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2-story home. That's not optimum for you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're a family of 4, yeah, maybe. And if there comes a situation, if you set everyone up in a living standard that they can live in. Yes, this is tantamount. This is very close to communism, but I believe this will work. It works in the U.S. military. Barracks. That's exactly what they are. You set an individual up with the basic needs of housing. When you set him up like this, you set him up with the basic needs of housing. You set him up with a fund drawn from taxpayer money. You set him up with a fund that he can draw from to clothe himself and to feed himself. You set all that up, and when he goes, and then you let him go to work. Let him go to work. What he wants above and beyond the basics, let him pay for. Let him cover. If everyone's set up on that equal footing that way, if you want something above and beyond, go out and get it. Don't expect the handout.
And that's exactly it. Is that I would and from that I would even argue that people who are living on disability, for example, to use an example that I'm familiar with to a certain extent by proxy, the limitation of you can only make so much and they start to claw back your disability. No, let them have the basic necessities and then allow them to work up as much as they can. Provide them if they need a tool X to be able to do the job, give them the tool, and but let them actually demonstrate that they can make something with the tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the question is though, why is it that if this concept works so well with the American military, why has it not been adopted for civilian use?
Because the fact that the American military requires an amount of discipline that the average individual does not have.
So governments would not adopt this system for with the understanding of trying to instill such a system of discipline in the average populace.
Exactly. I'm gonna give you a statistic here. Less than 1%, or actually less than 5.
Software up and running.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm going to mute Will.
All right, go for it. Well, while he's speaking, I'll give you an example here. Less than 5% of the American population will ever desire to join the United States military. Of that 5%, less than 1 will ever physically do it.
I'm sorry, Will. Could you repeat that, please?
Okay, I didn't know if you caught that. And I'm going to give you a statistic here. Less than 5% of the American population will ever express a desire to join the United States military. Of that 5%, less than 1 will ever physically go into a recruiter's office and do it.
And
it has nothing to do with the physical requirements. I know plenty of people that want to, but are ineligible to join due to a pre-existing condition.
Mm-hmm. So is it? So you said it's primarily a lack of discipline issue.
I honestly believe that it is.
So what about the referencing back to some older work? I remember that Robert Heinlein proposed the concept of serving 2 years under military discipline for citizenship. Possibly extrapolating from that model, would that be a possible way to encourage the discipline that we are seeking for the system that we're proposing in the U.S. public more effectively?
I believe it would be a very good stepping stone, but as far as being the only thing, absolutely not. We all know that individual at our jobs that when he's on the clock, he's the model employee, but the moment he walks out the door, he can't stand the place.
What would you propose as the next stepping stone from beyond Heinlein's?
I really don't know, man. I mean, there's too many variables in the concept of the human species to really nail it down.
Mm-hmm.
What works for one is never going to work for another.
Fair point. Well, I guess we'll leave it here for now then. Thanks again to former Sergeant Will Johnson for. Firstly, I'd like to thank him for his service to his country. I'm Canadian, but most people are going to say thanks anyway. So, I might as well say it. If most of his fellow Americans won't. And I'd like to thank I'd like to thank you as well for coming on the video today. For those who are watching at home, I'm hoping that you'll forgive the technical snafus we had earlier, and please feel free to leave in the comments below your thoughts on some of the stuff that's been discussed today. Do you have ideas for how society might be better reformed in a way that people will actually have a work ethic for once that will make them that will get rid of this handout mentality, but allow for basic necessities to be covered in such a way that people will want to innovate on their own. As usual, thanks again for watching. This is the Overlapping Magisteria channel, and as always, catch you guys in the next video.